Hi, this is Brett Williamson from Superflow Tech Support, and I wanted to take a look at how one of our engine dyno consoles and computer system goes together. So I'm going to do a little video here to help you with connections on that. This is a mock-up in our test department, so it's not an actual dyno cell, but it should give you a good idea of what you need to do to hook up your system. So let's have a look. Okay, so this is the overall system sitting here, and conveniently we've got a sensor box, which would be out in your test cell, sitting here next to it, so we can run some short cables over and just connect everything and get it set up. Your sensor box would typically be out in your test cell, maybe mounted to a boom or mounted to the wall. This one's on a pedestal. We use those on chassis dynos. It's not a very good idea to use that type of arrangement for an engine dyno application, so you probably won't be using that. On the side of the sensor box here, you see 3 cables, and those are the 3 cables that are going to run into your console and your computer. So these 2 cables over here, the panel is now labeled console J1, console J2, and the cables will be appropriately labeled as well to match up with those ports. Those are going to go actually over to the black console in the back, and I'll show you those connections here in a minute. The other cable is for the computer network, and it's going to run over to a little network switch that we've got. Now I'll point that out when we get over and look at that closer here in a second as well. You'll note that all 3 cables are Cat5 cables, or if you're using Cat6 it's the same thing, but they're Ethernet 10 base T type of cables. These 2 are not actually passing Ethernet signals. They're being used kind of like serial bus cables, but this one is passing Ethernet packets. Okay, so let's have a look. We'll pull this console around here just a little bit so you can see back here. And what you're going to see is we have the 2 cables that are coming from the console connections over in the engines or the sensor box, and they're labeled J1 and J2 over here as well. If for some reason you were to connect those backwards, you put the one that goes in J2 and the J1, the only thing that's going to happen is when you try to turn on your console, it's not going to turn on the sensor box out there in the test cell. We get that call every once in a while. People say, hey, I can't get my sensor box to turn on, because on engine dyno systems we disable this switch. The way we want you to be able to turn it on is with this power switch here on the console, and typically if you reverse those cables you won't be able to do that. It's a simple fix. Just flip the cables around the other direction and you'll be in business. It's got a DC power connection over here, and back here in the back you see a power brick. You're going to have 115 volts AC to power that. This port here that says program J4, well, we don't use that. That's used if we need to update the firmware that's inside on the circuit board in this console. You won't be using that, so don't be plugging a cable in there, and you're not missing a cable. We just don't use it unless we have to program new firmware into that board. There's a J3 connector over here. It's a round 24-pin Amphenol connector, and we do supply a cable for that, and that cable is to work these 6 switches here on the console. They're just toggle switches. They basically do a make-break kind of function. The cable we supply has unterminated ends on it so that you can use it to connect to some sort of relay circuitry that might control your infrastructure, your pumps, your fans, your lights in your room, whatever. Those switches and this cable is not connected in any way with the sensor box or the Windyne software. It doesn't have any application there. Okay, so this little monitor that we have here is going to be how you operate automated tests on your engine dyno, and you can see that the monitor has a brand name. It's called MIMO, M-I-M-O, and that's how we refer to it as well. It's not a computer, it's just a little monitor. Even though this will lift out of there, you won't be able to do anything with it, because once it lifts out of there it doesn't have a connection to the computer anymore. The connection to the computer is going to be through this USB cable here, and you're going to have the other end connected to the computer, and it actually has 2 USB connections. When you plug this one in here, you'll note, and I don't know if you can see it on the video, but there'll be a little circle with an arrow here, and that should be visible to you up on the top. The connector is directional. I mean, if you flip it upside down, you shouldn't be able to push it in, but I guess with enough force you might be able to. But if you just look for the circle with the arrow on the top, you'll know you got it in the right direction. So I just want to point out one other thing that I've noticed in the field with this particular USB connection on the Mimo. You can see I'm wiggling it a little bit here. I have had issues where that doesn't want to make good connection, so what I do to fix that is I take like a zip tie end, a nylon tie, and I cut the end off of it, and I wedge it underneath here, just so it's kind of wedged up like that. I've used toothpicks before as well. Either thing will work, but once you put something underneath there to wedge it, it just really holds that connector in there tight, won't let it wiggle, and you may have less trouble with your Mimo not coming on. So on the console, just a quick overview of the console. The toggle switches, as I mentioned, are not connected to the Windyne or the sensor box in any way. The toggle switches are pretty much standalone. One of the things you'll notice about them, as long as you have power, that power brick plugged into the back of the console, the lights on those switches will always stay lit. They are not turned on and off by this power switch. The power switch, that key is unique. Don't lose it. If you do, you'll have to get another one, probably a whole nother switch, because each switch and each key are matched up. And we only give you one key. I have had to, make that work before without a key. Took a paper clip and took me about 2 minutes to get it to turn on. So it's not the end of the world, but just do your best not to lose that key. Emergency stop function. What that's going to do is if you have any of these functions turned on and you're running your engine and you hit that emergency stop, it's going to kill those functions. You're going to get an emergency stop active up here on your screen. To reset that, you turn the knob and it resets it, and then you can touch the acknowledge up here. That'll reset everything, and then your switches will come back on. If you don't go through that process, it's not going to come back on and work. Again, these ignition, fuel pump, starter, and this one called fan, those are associated with your engine control panel here on the sensor box. So this is ignition, starter, fuel pump, and this one out here says auxiliary 1, and that's actually the fan switch on the console. Two different engineers didn't talk to one another, so the labels don't match. Anyway, you connect battery voltage here, you'll get an LED indication here, and then when you turn those switches on, I don't know that you won't get any of this right now because we don't have a battery connected, but you can see the mag kill lit up. I just turned on the ignition. So on this console, this one's rigged up for an electric throttle actuator, so it has this touch panel over here on this side, which is for the throttle control. Most likely your system will not have that. We only put that on maybe 10% of the systems that we sell. It's a rather expensive option, and most people don't want an electric throttle. The servo valve control is this panel over here. It's a touch panel. When it's in the manual position, you turn the knob, you can see the numbers increasing. That just makes the servo valve go from fully open at 0 to fully closed at 100. 100% would be maximum load, 0% would be the minimum load. You have a coarse, a medium, and a fine setting. Fine in manual is 1% per click, medium 5% per click, and coarse is 10% per click. Just allows you to adjust the sensitivity of that knob. You have two closed loop control modes, engine speed and engine torque. Typically you're going to use engine speed. The only people who use engine torque might be diesel engine test operators, so most of you will be using engine speed. When you do that, it switches to an RPM value, and in the coarse mode, each click is 100 RPM. In the medium mode, each click is 50. And in the fine mode, each click is 10. So that's how you can adjust RPM based on the servo valve controlling to those engine speeds. It will default to the manual position whenever the system is powered up. Okay, so we supply Engine Dyno systems with two 22-inch monitors, and the monitors use two different methodologies for connecting to the computer. The left-hand monitor is what we're going to call the Windows main monitor, and with that one we connect with an HDMI cable that plugs into an HDMI port on the back of the small computer here that we supply. The right-hand monitor is going to use a digital video port on the back of it, and that digital video port is going to plug into the back of the computer using what's called a display port. So it's a little different on each end. It's not digital video on each end. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what those cables look like, but I want you to make sure you understand that for the left-hand monitor you will use the HDMI cable, and for the right-hand monitor you're going to use the DisplayPort to DVI cable. Okay, what we have here is an HDMI to digital video cable assembly that we supply for the HDMI port, and that would be for the left-hand monitor. So if you look at this, you see it's got a little notch on either side. That's an HDMI style cable, and this is digital video, and that's going to be the same end on both of the cables that we supply, but this end, which goes into the computer, is going to be different. Okay, so this is the DisplayPort connection. Notice it only has a notch on the one side. The other side is square. So that's a DisplayPort style connector, and this is a digital video connector. It just has an extra couple of rows of pins in it compared to the HDMI cable that we supply, but it is going to go into a port on the back of the monitor for digital video. This is going to go into the back of the computer, and this is the display port. And if you look on this one, it has a little button here that you press down, and it's what retracts these little tangs here, and those little tangs allow you to pull that cable in and out of the computer. HDMI doesn't have that. So this little box that we see here, this is our little Dell Windows 10 computer that we supply. It's a little Dell Optiplex 3050. It's got Windows 10 on it, and it uses a solid-state hard drive, so no more mechanical hard drive. It doesn't have a CD-ROM in it, and the ports on the back that we want to discuss, this port over here obviously is to a little power brick. That's what's going to power it. This is the HDMI connection here, and that's going over to the left-hand monitor. This is the display port. You see the little button here for pressing down to remove that. That's going to go to the right-hand monitor. Then you're going to have USB connections for the mouse and the keyboard. And if you want to replace that with some sort of wireless keyboard or whatever, you're welcome to do so, but we supply ones that are connected with the USB. And then this is a dual USB connection, and that's for the MIMO monitor because it has its own power requirements. So what they do is they use two USB ports to power it. And then the last connection here is a network cable, and that network cable is going over here to a network switch. And the network switch also has a cable, a white one here, that's connecting over to the computer port here on the sensor box. That's this computer network cable. So we run that over to the switch, and then from the switch, if you look on the back here, we use the ports that we're using are going to be typically labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and this connection over here says WAN, Wide Area Network. We do not use that connection. That would be to connect to the outside world. We're not requiring you to connect to the outside world through the internet, so we're going to use these 4 ports here. Now it doesn't matter which of the 4 you plug into. You can see on this one we're plugged into port 1 and port 4. You could plug into port 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, whatever you want, but just don't use this one over here labeled WAN, W-A-N. Then it has its own power source right here, another power brick that you're going to have to plug into. So this Dell computer, we're out of ports in the back. If you do hook your printer up and you're going to plug in with a USB cable to your printer, you're going to need to plug in to one of these two front ports. The power switch for this is this button right here. It's pretty simple to figure out. It's a very easy computer to navigate around. Okay, so that pretty much covers the connections that you're going to use and some of the features that are part of the Windyne based console system for an Engine Dyno application. Hopefully this will get you through the setup process without any issues. If you do have issues, feel free to call us at Superflow Customer Service. The number is 719-471-1746. Thanks.